September 15th, 1940. High over the Kent coast, the sky looks calm from far away. But up close, it's a machine. Metal, fuel, and nerves, moving on a schedule nobody on the German side can explain. A German fighter pilot slides his Messerschmitt into formation. Below him, a block of Heinkel bombers and their escorts push inland, tight and steady, aim toward London. Behind them is the Channel. Ahead is England. In the Luftwaffe, surprise is supposed to be a weapon all by itself. Show up fast. Show up where they don't expect. Catch fighters on the ground. Hit airfields before anyone can react. That's the idea. But over Britain in 1940, that idea keeps dying the exact same way. Only minutes after crossing the coastline, the radio starts to crackle. Bomber crews report contacts, fighters already climbing, already turning into position, already waiting, not searching, not wandering around hoping to find something, waiting like they were tipped off. And this isn't a one-time bad day. It becomes a pattern so consistent, it feels like a trap built into the sky. German crews start saying the same thing in different words. The British are never caught off guard. Not once. Think about what that means. In air combat, timing is life. If defenders scramble late, they climb under pressure and meet attackers at a disadvantage. If defenders scramble early, they climb calmly, form up, choose altitude, and set the angle of attack. Early defenders get to choose the fight. In the Battle of Britain, the British keep getting that choice. German pilots and crews begin to feel like they're flying into a prepared ambush every single raid. The moment they cross the coast, it's like a switch flips. British Hurricanes and Spitfires appear with a kind of precision that shouldn't be possible, showing up at the right height and the right place, over and over again. That's what makes it so disturbing, because if Britain is doing this with luck, it should fail sometimes. If it's just good scouting, weather should mess it up. If it's just more pilots, there should still be raids that slip through, or at least raids where the British arrive late and scramble messy. But the Germans keep seeing the same nightmare, a clean, organized intercept, as if somebody on the British side is watching the whole raid unfold in real time. So the question spreads through Luftwaffe units like a cold fear. How? How are they always there? If you enjoy W3 stories that expose the hidden machinery behind famous battles, subscribe and stick with this one, because the answer isn't a single hero. It's a system. To find that answer, the Luftwaffe does what any modern Air Force would do. It turns the mystery into a file, a stack of reports, a pattern on paper. Across the Channel in occupied Western Europe, Luftwaffe intelligence officers look at mission summaries and try to make the math work. Daylight raid after daylight raid, British fighters appear before the bombers reach targets. Not always in huge numbers at first, but early enough and accurately enough to force combat on Britain's terms. For Luftwaffe planners, it doesn't just feel unfair, it feels impossible. Because the Germans believe they are protecting their own secrets. Flight routes can change, altitudes can change, timing can shift, plans can be adjusted at the last minute. The Luftwaffe can mask intent with feints, sending one force toward one target while another force heads somewhere else, and yet, again and again, the main force gets met. Not guessed, met. Luftwaffe intelligence begins documenting details that go beyond "they showed up." Reports focus on how quickly British fighters climb to the right level and how often they arrive positioned to intercept instead of stumbling into contact by chance. It's the difference between bumping into an enemy and being guided straight to them. German commanders start describing the experience like a grim routine. Not "we surprise them," more like "we arrive." And that difference matters, because surprise is how bombers get through. Arrival is how bombers get chewed up. By late summer and early autumn 1940, losses are heavy. German aircraft are being destroyed in significant numbers, and even crews that survive are coming back shaken, not just from enemy fire, but from the sense that the British response is automatic and unavoidable. So the Luftwaffe tries to break the pattern by changing the problem. They try night operations, hoping darkness will restore surprise. Britain begins building a night defense too, imperfect at first, but improving. They try very low approaches, skimming under what they think the British can track. British fighters still show up in the right zones, and anti-aircraft fire is waiting. They try high-altitude flights. They still get tracked and challenged. They try feints. British defenses seem to react to the real threat and avoid wasting strength where it doesn't matter. From the German perspective, it starts to look like Britain is seeing the raid form up, seeing it cross the coastline, and seeing where it's going. Before the bombs ever fall, it's not magic, but in 1940, it might as well be. And the strangest part is that the thing doing it isn't hidden in a lab. It isn't buried deep in London. It's standing out in the open along the coast. German reconnaissance aircraft have been photographing tall towers on the British shoreline since before the battle reached its peak. Big steel structures, multiple masts, arrays that look industrial, ugly, and blunt. They don't look like secret wonder weapons. They look like something you'd see near a power station. The Germans label them with cautious guesses: communication towers, observation posts, some kind of radio facility. They consider possibilities like direction finding, the kind of thing used to locate transmissions. They are close to the truth, but close isn't enough, because even if you correctly suspect these towers are part of detection, you still have to understand what Britain did next, how Britain turned detection into control. One of the easiest mistakes in war is thinking technology wins battles by itself. In reality, technology often just creates information, and information is useless unless it travels fast, gets understood fast, and produces action fast. Britain in 1940 has built a machine to do exactly that. Those coastal towers are part of Britain's early warning radar network, known by a deliberately bland name at the time: RDF, or radio direction finding. Later, the wider world calls it radar, but in 1940, Britain keeps it wrapped in secrecy, not by hiding it underground, but by letting it sit out in the open, looking almost old-fashioned. And that's the twist. The revolutionary thing is hiding in plain sight. Here's the basic idea, in simple terms. A transmitter sends out a powerful radio pulse. It travels outward at the speed of light. If it hits something solid and metallic, like an aircraft, it bounces back as an echo. A receiver detects that echo. If you know the exact moment you sent the pulse, and you measure the time it takes for the echo to return, you can calculate distance. It's like shouting in a canyon and timing how long the sound takes to come back. Except this is radio, and the canyon wall is a bomber formation. Now scale that up. In 1940, Britain's chain home stations can detect aircraft far out over the water, often at ranges measured in scores of miles, commonly described around the 100-mile range under good conditions. Reports from the period and later analysis often describe early warning at roughly the 2-hour mark for slow-moving formations, depending on altitude and conditions. And that's the point. It gives Britain time to decide which squadrons to launch, time to choose altitude, time to form up, time to place fighters where the bombers will be before the bombers arrive. The Germans do have radar technology of their own. German sets like Freya exist before and during 1940, and they can be effective. But the German mindset treats radar more like a local tool, something that helps coastal defense, something that supports a specific area, something tactical. Britain treats radar as the front end of a national defense system. That difference changes everything. Chain home is not one tower. It is a chain. Multiple stations placed along the coast, overlapping coverage so that aircraft crossing toward England get picked up, tracked, and handed off from one station's view to the next. By 1940, the network includes roughly a couple dozen key sites, with major stations spread along vulnerable approaches, especially in the south and east. The number 21 gets repeated because it captures the brutal simplicity of what the Luftwaffe ran into. Not 1,000 observers, but a limited set of fixed points working together like a wall. And once a wall exists, raids stop being surprises. Raids become scheduled events. German reconnaissance photos show the structures clearly. Tall steel transmitter masts, receiver towers, arrays of wires and antenna elements, plus small buildings that don't look like much at all. That also confuses the Germans, because the visible hardware looks crude compared to the effect it produces. A few towers, a few huts, some wires, How could that create a defense that seems to know the future? That's exactly why it works. The wow factor is not in the look, it's in the organization behind it. And in part 2, that's where the story goes. Into the rooms where the information from those towers gets turned into decisions fast enough to move squadrons like chess pieces, while real men are flying and dying over the channel. Because Chain Home doesn't win the Battle of Britain by shooting down bombers. It wins by making sure the bombers never arrive alone. Knowing an enemy is coming is one thing. Being able to do something useful with that knowledge, fast enough to matter, is something else entirely. That's where Britain's real advantage lives in 1940, not just in the radar towers on the coast, but in what happens after those towers see something, because a warning that arrives too late is just trivia, and a warning that gets stuck in red tape is basically worthless. Britain builds a system that refuses to waste time. When a Chain Home station detects aircraft out over the channel, the information doesn't just sit in a notebook. It moves quickly. Operators estimate range and direction, then pass the plot onward. Other stations confirm and refine. As the contact comes closer, the track tightens. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is speed plus consistency. Then it all funnels into an organized command process that the Luftwaffe simply does not expect. At Fighter Command headquarters, Bentley Priory, outside London, Britain runs something that looks, from the outside, like a normal command center, but inside, it functions like an early version of modern air defense. Information comes in from the coast and gets filtered, checked, and turned into tracks that controllers can actually use. Plotters move markers across a large map table to show where raids are, where they're heading, and how fast they're moving. It's not glamorous. It's not a dogfight. It's people doing disciplined, repetitive work under pressure, and it matters more than most of the pilots ever know, because this is where the British do the thing the Germans can't stop. They turn early warning into early positioning. A German bomber formation isn't just detected, it is processed into a decision. Which squadrons should go up? From which airfields? At what altitude? On what vector so they reach the intercept point with energy and height instead of arriving late and low? If the British scramble at the wrong time, they waste fuel and exhaust pilots. If they scramble too late, they lose the fight before it starts. If they scramble too early, they burn out their own defense. So timing becomes a science, and that science is built around the simple reality of aircraft speed. A bomber force cruising toward London is not teleporting. It has to cross distance. If radar can see the raid far enough out, Britain can launch fighters, climb them to a good altitude, and place them ahead of the bombers, meaning the intercept happens before the bombers reach targets, not after. That's the nightmare German crews keep reporting. They are met inland by fighters already at fighting height, already organized, already in position to attack. From the German perspective, it feels like Britain has guessed the future. In reality, Britain has built a machine that compresses time. Radar detection creates minutes of warning. The command system turns those minutes into altitude, position, and coordination. That's the whole trick. The Luftwaffe is used to opponents who react. Britain is acting. And it keeps happening in roughly the same rhythm. German crews notice it, even if they don't know the mechanics behind it. Cross the coast. Wait a few minutes. Contacts. Fighters climbing. Intercept set up. Attacks begin. Some crews even start predicting the moment the first fighters will show. Not because they have inside knowledge, because the British system is consistent enough to become predictable, which sounds strange, but it's deadly, because consistency in defense means the attacker is always paying a price. Every raid becomes a known event. Every raid gets met. And Britain, importantly, doesn't have to launch everything every time. That's another difference. With radar-guided control, Britain can choose the minimum force needed to meet each raid, then keep other squadrons fresh for later attacks. That kind of efficiency matters in a long campaign. The Luftwaffe wants to flood the sky and break the defense. Britain wants to manage resources and survive day after day. This is why the coastal towers aren't just radar towers. They are the first link in an integrated chain. Detection, reporting, filtering, commanding, intercepting. When all of it works together, the time from first detection to fighters meeting the raid can be short enough that German bombers are engaged well before the target. Not every time in the exact same spot, and not always with perfect accuracy. Weather, altitude, and the messiness of war still exist, but good enough fast enough beats perfect too late every day of the week. Now put yourself in the Luftwaffe's position. You can accept losses if you believe the next raid might slip through. You can accept risk if surprise might return. But when the enemy is consistently ready, your entire doctrine starts to rot. So the Germans try to kill the source. They bomb the towers. On paper, that should work. The structures are big, fixed, and visible. You can photograph them. You can aim at them. You can hit them. And yes, chain home sites do take damage during the battle, but the network is built to keep functioning. Some stations have multiple towers. Coverage overlaps between stations. If one site is degraded, another can still see much of the same airspace. And repair work is prioritized hard because Britain understands what those towers really represent: time. When the Luftwaffe knocks a station down for a while, Britain works to bring it back up fast. It's not always instant, and it's not always perfect, but the pattern the Germans hate keeps returning. The warning comes back. From the Luftwaffe point of view, this is maddening. They believe they've hit the right target, they confirm damage, and then the British response returns as if the system never left. So they try another route, disrupt the signal. They attempt jamming and countermeasures, pushing noise into the air to reduce effectiveness. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it complicates British tracking, but it doesn't restore surprise in the way the Luftwaffe needs, because jamming is a contest too. And Britain is fighting it from a defensive position with a system that can adapt. And there's a deeper issue. Even if you reduce radar effectiveness, Britain still has an advantage from how the information is organized and acted upon. The British don't need perfect data to make the right decision. They need a reliable early picture. If they get large formation approaching this sector, that alone is enough to put fighters into the right general area at the right altitude. Then visual spotting takes over at closer range, so the Luftwaffe keeps running into the same wall. They are trying to win an air campaign with tactics that depend on catching the enemy late. Britain has built a defense that exists to prevent late. And now comes the part the Germans struggle to understand, even when they start suspecting radar. Radar isn't the only difference, the human organization is. The British system is structured so information moves quickly and decisions can override ego. A plotter on a map table isn't trying to be a hero, she's trying to be accurate. A controller isn't trying to rack up kills, he's trying to put squadrons in the right place at the right time, and that requires a certain mindset. Accept centralized control, accept coordination, accept that the system comes first. The Luftwaffe in 1940 is excellent at a lot of things: pilot skill, aggressive tactics, operational experience. But their command culture leans heavily toward local initiative and traditional hierarchy. Radar, in their framework, fits as a tool that supports local defense, not as the backbone of a centralized national command and control machine. That sounds like a small difference. It isn't, because a radar set by itself is equipment. A radar network tied directly into command is a weapon. Britain makes radar into command. The Luftwaffe, at least in 1940, mostly does not. So while German commanders argue over what those coastal towers truly are, British controllers are already using them every day, every raid, every approach line. And out over the Channel and the Kent coastline, Luftwaffe bomber crews keep living the same reality. A bomber formation approaches with careful planning, altitude chosen, route adjusted, timing calculated. Then Britain meets it anyway. Fighters appear with height advantage. Attacks come in coordinated waves. Bombers drop early, scatter, turn back, or get destroyed before they can do serious damage. And after enough of these raids, the tactical problem becomes a psychological problem because aircrews start to feel tracked before they even see a single British plane. They start to feel like the moment they cross the coast, the decision has already been made somewhere. Fighters are coming, and they're coming the right way. That's not just fear of combat, that's fear of inevitability. And once inevitability settles in, morale doesn't just dip, it fractures. By late 1940, German losses are mounting, and the payoff isn't matching the cost. Britain is still standing. Fighter Command is still functioning. The radar chain is still feeding the system. The Luftwaffe can bomb London, sure, but it cannot blind Britain first. It cannot create the window of confusion it needs to win air superiority. And without that window, the dream of forcing Britain down through daylight bombing and air dominance starts slipping away. By the time autumn turns cold in 1940, the Battle of Britain is no longer just a contest of aircraft and tactics. It's a contest of endurance. And endurance is where chain home hits the Luftwaffe the hardest, because it doesn't have to be perfect to be decisive. It only has to keep doing the same brutal thing, day after day. Detect early, direct fighters, force and intercept, over and over. For German bomber crews, the pattern becomes a kind of curse. They can change altitude. They can adjust routes. They can shuffle timing. They can argue in briefings and promise the next raid will be the one that breaks through. Then they cross the coast, and Britain is already moving. Spitfires appear high, with the sun behind them. Hurricanes come in lower, climbing into the bomber stream. Attacks arrive in organized waves. Crews feel the same pressure in their chests. Not just fear of getting shot down, but the sick certainty that the fight has been arranged for them. And that certainty starts doing damage in places armor and guns can't protect. It damages hope. In war, hope is not a soft emotion. Hope is a survival tool. It is the belief that skill, luck, or timing might give you a way out. Even when odds are ugly, hope keeps people sharp and stubborn. Chain home attacks that belief. Because if the defender consistently controls the time and place of contact, the attacker stops imagining victory and starts focusing on escape. The mission shifts from hit the target to get back alive. That change is quiet, but it's deadly. German air crews begin reporting symptoms that sound like fear before combat, not during combat. Nausea, tremors, panic, a feeling of being hunted the moment the English coastline comes into view. Not because they see British fighters, because they know British fighters are already climbing. They may not know where the intercept will happen, and they may not know exactly which squadrons will arrive first, but they believe the system is already in motion against them. That's what a real information advantage feels like to the side that doesn't have it, like the enemy has erased the unknown. To the Luftwaffe High Command, it's a tactical problem. To the men and crews flying the raids, it becomes something closer to fate. And now, when the Luftwaffe tries to solve the problem, they keep solving the wrong part of it. They focus on equipment. They focus on targets. They focus on jamming. They focus on bombing the towers. But the towers are not the whole weapon. The weapon is the full British system. Radar, communications, plotting, command decisions, and controlled interception. Destroy one piece for a few hours, and the rest still functions. Damage one station, and overlapping coverage still catches tracks. Jam signals, and Britain still gets enough warning to put fighters into the right airspace, where eyes can finish the job. The Luftwaffe begins to realize, slowly and painfully, that they are not fighting British pilots. They are fighting an organized defense machine that tells British pilots where to be. And that means the Luftwaffe is trapped in a kind of math problem. If you want to defeat Britain's defenses, you have to keep attacking until Fighter Command collapses. But a steady stream of attacks against a defense that consistently meets you equals steady losses. Steady losses create exhaustion in men and machines. Aircraft wear out, engines fail, maintenance piles up, crews lose confidence, units lose experienced personnel faster than they can be replaced. Attrition starts acting like gravity, and gravity doesn't care how brave you are. The Luftwaffe had strong advantages in some areas: good pilots, aggressive doctrine, experienced crews, at points numerical strength. But Britain has two strategic advantages that become more powerful with time: defensive efficiency and industrial replacement. When Britain can send fighters up only when needed, at the right altitude, in the right sector, every sortie has a purpose. That saves fuel, saves pilots, and saves aircraft. It turns defense into an efficient routine. Meanwhile, German operations keep burning resources just to reach the fight, resources that get used up before the first shot is even fired. As the weeks pass, German serviceability rates suffer, not only from battle damage, but from sheer operational fatigue. Planes fly, land, get patched, fly again. Pilots operate under constant strain. Squadrons lose veterans and replace them with less experienced men, which makes formations less stable and losses worse. This is what chain home does at the strategic level. It forces the Luftwaffe into repeated engagements on unfavorable terms until the attacker begins wearing down faster than the defender. And it's not because Britain has magical aircraft. It's because Britain can choose when to fight. That choice changes the entire campaign. So what does the Luftwaffe do when daylight raids become too costly? They adapt in a way that admits the truth without saying it out loud. They push harder into night bombing. The Blitz becomes the new focus. London, industrial cities, ports, bombed in darkness with navigation challenges and less direct fighter interception. But even at night, the Luftwaffe doesn't gain back what it wants most: control. Night bombing reduces certain risks, but it also reduces accuracy. It spreads effort across a wider area. It still doesn't break Fighter Command the way a true air superiority campaign would, and Britain continues improving night defenses as well, even if night fighting is more complex and less decisive than daytime interception. By late 1940 into early 1941, the Luftwaffe faces a strategic reality. The campaign is not delivering the result Germany needs. Britain is not suing for peace. Britain is not losing its fighter force. Britain is not opening the door to invasion. And behind that reality is the same simple cause. Britain can see raids coming early enough to meet them consistently. Without surprise, strategic bombing against a prepared defender changes character. It becomes less like a knockout punch and more like a slow trade of damage. Damage Germany cannot leverage into victory. Eventually, the shift becomes visible. Daylight bombing declines sharply. The Luftwaffe does not stop because it forgets Britain or because it suddenly feels mercy. It stops because the core approach has become unsustainable. Then, in 1941, Germany's priorities moved decisively east. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, begins pulling attention aircraft and planning away from the West. Officially, it's strategic reallocation. Practically, it's also an admission. Germany could not break Britain's air defense system on the terms it needed, and chain home sits under that whole outcome like a foundation. It doesn't win the battle by itself, but it makes Britain's victory sustainable. That word matters. Sustainable. A defense doesn't have to destroy every bomber to win. It has to endure longer than the attacker can afford. It has to make the attacker pay a steady price until the attacker either changes strategy or runs out of strength. Chain home helps Britain do that with ruthless efficiency. And this is where the deeper story surfaces. Beyond towers, beyond radar pulses. It's about organizational culture. Britain's system depends on centralized command reacting quickly to incoming data. It depends on trust in a process that elevates speed and coordination over personal initiative. It depends on people following directions that come from a room they cannot see, based on information they do not personally witness. That is not a natural fit for every military. It requires flexibility. It requires acceptance that useful information might come from civilians, from operators who are not senior officers, and that decisions might be made centrally and pushed downward fast. Britain builds that. The Luftwaffe in 1940 largely does not. Germany has radar technology and brilliant engineers. It has capable equipment, but it treats radar more as a tactical support tool than as the backbone of a centralized air defense network. That's not stupidity. It's doctrine. It's habit. It's hierarchy. And when doctrine and hierarchy are wrong for the moment, you can have excellent gear and still lose the strategic fight. This is why German analysis after the fact often circles the same conclusion. Britain didn't merely possess technology. Britain possessed a system. Equipment can be bombed. A system can absorb damage and keep functioning. That difference is why the Luftwaffe keeps seeing British fighters already there, even after raids, even after strikes on installations, even after jamming attempts. The system keeps producing the same output: timely interception. And once you see the battle through that lens, the outcome makes more sense. Britain is not winning because every pilot is a genius. Britain is winning because it can allocate force precisely and repeatedly. Britain doesn't have to guess where the main raid is headed. Britain doesn't have to waste squadrons chasing ghosts. Britain doesn't have to scramble late and climb under pressure every time. Britain can meet the raid with enough fighters at the right place and do it again tomorrow. That's how you beat an attacker who needs surprise. You remove surprise, then you let attrition do the rest. What makes this story even more striking is how invisible Chain Home becomes in memory. In popular retellings, the Battle of Britain is Spitfires, hurricanes, daring pilots, dramatic duels, and heroic speeches. All of that matters, and the human courage is real. But the towers, those stark steel masts along the coast, don't fit the heroic movie version. They're not romantic. They don't dogfight. They don't dive through flak. They just stand there. They just see. And the people inside the system, plotters, operators, controllers, are doing work that looks ordinary until you understand what it creates. The ability to make the right decision before the enemy arrives. After the war, many of the physical signs are reduced or removed. Command rooms return to normal life. Equipment evolves. Secrecy continues for years in various forms. Meanwhile, the idea spreads. The core principle behind Chain Home becomes the foundation for modern air defense thinking. Detect early, integrate information, centralize control, and intercept precisely. Later networks, later commands, later warning systems across multiple countries build on the same logic. The names change, the equipment gets smaller and faster, but the idea remains. Awareness plus coordination can defeat force that depends on surprise. In that sense, Chain Home is not just a woodwier artifact. It is a turning point in how war is managed. It shows that information, if processed fast and used systematically, can outweigh raw numbers and even individual skill. And that is why German crews in 1940 kept describing Britain as already waiting. They weren't describing a trick. They were describing what happens when an entire defense is built around seeing first. That's why the Luftwaffe, with strong aircraft and aggressive doctrine, hits an invisible wall for months. That's why daylight raids become a grind, then a loss, then a withdrawal. And that's why the most important British advantage in the Battle of Britain is not a single plane or a single squadron. It's the chain, a set of coastal towers, a flow of data, a room that turns that data into decisions, and a country that has the discipline to trust the system day after day. The Luftwaffe came expecting to surprise Britain. Instead, they flew into an island that could see them coming, and once that happened, the rest became math.